From The Exorcist's cursed set to Lucille Ball's seance rooms, 9 Hollywood legends claimed spirits possessed their bodies. Some never recovered. This is what really happened. Behind Hollywood's glamour, these stars claimed spirits took control during filming, through curses and by prophecies that came true. Lucille Ball channeling the departed, Jayne Mansfield cursed by the Church of Satan, Natalie Wood haunted by a drowning prophecy. The Exorcist's 2 leading ladies both claiming demonic encounters. These weren't publicity stunts. These were private torments the studios desperately hid. It begins with a 14-year-old girl who thought she was just making a movie. Linda Blair, when The Exorcist became too real. When 14-year-old Linda Blair landed the role of possessed child Regan McNeil in The Exorcist, she had no idea the demonic character would follow her home. What began as the opportunity of a lifetime for the young actress would become a nightmare that blurred the line between performance and reality. In 1972, director William Friedkin was searching for someone who could portray innocence corrupted by evil. Blair, with her cherubic face and bright smile, seemed perfect. Her mother was thrilled. After all, this was a major studio picture based on a best-selling novel. How could anyone predict what would unfold on that set? From the first day of filming, something felt wrong. The set was plagued by inexplicable malfunctions. Refrigeration units designed to create the cold bedroom scenes broke down repeatedly. Yet the temperature would drop suddenly without any mechanical explanation. The air itself seemed to thicken with an oppressive quality that made breathing difficult. Cameras jammed at critical moments. Lights exploded without warning, showering the set with glass that somehow never injured anyone. A fire destroyed part of the set, though investigators never determined the cause. 9 people connected to the production would pass away before the film's release, including 2 actors and several crew members. Even the film's technical advisor, a Jesuit priest, began expressing concerns about what might be happening beyond the cameras. But it was Blair who bore the heaviest burden. During the intense possession scenes, she later revealed that she felt an unseen observer during every take, something that went beyond Friedkin's demanding direction. The contortions, the screaming, the vulgar dialogue she had to deliver as a child, all of it seemed to invite something darker into her consciousness. Between takes, she would retreat to her trailer, feeling an oppressive presence she couldn't escape. The metallic smell of the refrigerated set mixed with something else, something that made her stomach turn, a scent she couldn't identify but would never forget. Her mother noticed the change. The bright, bubbly teenager was becoming withdrawn and frightened. When filming wrapped, Blair hoped the experience would fade. Instead, it intensified. She suffered recurring nightmares where the demon from the film seemed to visit her in her bedroom. She would wake in terror, convinced she wasn't alone, her sheets damp with sweat that smelled faintly of sulfur. Objects in her room would be moved. She heard whispers in the darkness. Her mother, desperate to help, consulted psychologists and eventually spiritual advisors. Blair needed professional support to process what she had experienced, though she struggled to articulate whether her trauma was psychological or something more sinister. The film's release brought her an Academy Award nomination at age 15, but also a tidal wave of public attention she wasn't prepared to handle. Fans and religious groups alike approached her as if she truly had been possessed. Some wanted to save her soul. Others blamed her for promoting evil. The role became a prison she couldn't escape. For years afterward, casting directors couldn't see her as anything but the girl from The Exorcist. Her career struggled under the weight of that single defining performance. The golden age of Hollywood and its aftermath demanded everything from its stars, including their psychological well-being. Directors like Friedkin believed real suffering created real art. They were right, but they never counted the cost these young performers would carry for the rest of their lives. As the decades passed, Blair embarked on a spiritual journey to reclaim herself from the darkness of that experience. She studied various spiritual practices, seeking understanding and peace. She spoke openly about the psychological toll of the role, helping others understand the real cost of certain types of performance. She devoted herself to animal welfare, channeling her energy toward healing and protection rather than the darkness that had once consumed her. The girl who played possessed had to find her way back to herself, one careful step at a time, whether the presence she felt was real or a manifestation of extreme psychological stress. The scars remained, but in confronting them, Blair discovered a strength that her younger self never knew she possessed. But Linda Blair's nightmare on The Exorcist set was nothing compared to what America's most beloved comedienne was experiencing in her own home, because Lucy Ricardo's real-life counterpart was having conversations with those who had crossed over, and they were answering back. Lucille Ball, When I Love Lucy's Star-Heard Voices. The seance was in full swing at Lucille Ball's Beverly Hills home in 1953. Around the candlelit table sat some of Hollywood's most respected names, but their eyes were fixed on Lucy, because Lucy wasn't Lucy anymore. The voice emerging from her throat belonged to someone who had been gone for more than a decade, and everyone present knew it. This wasn't the zany redhead they knew from television. This was a woman in the grip of something far beyond her control. The room smelled of melted wax and gardenias, Carol Lombard's favorite flower, though no one had brought gardenias that evening. America's beloved comedienne made millions laugh, but behind Lucy's pratfalls and comic timing, Lucille Ball was having conversations with the departed, and sometimes they answered back through her. The woman who perfected physical comedy harbored a secret that would have shattered her wholesome image. She believed she was a vessel for spirits from the other side. Ball's sensitivity to the supernatural began in childhood, long before the bright lights of Hollywood found her. She often spoke of sensing presences that others couldn't perceive, of knowing things she had no logical way of knowing. Her mother dismissed these experiences as an overactive imagination, but Ball knew differently. She felt connected to something beyond the visible world, a connection that both frightened and fascinated her. When Carole Lombard perished in a plane crash in 1942, Ball was devastated. The glamorous actress had been one of her closest friends in Hollywood, and the sudden loss left her grief-stricken. But then, something extraordinary happened. Ball began sensing Lombard's presence in her home. According to Ball's own testimony in a 1964 interview with a spiritualist magazine, she would smell Lombard's distinctive perfume, Shalimar, in empty rooms. She heard her friend's distinctive laugh echoing through hallways. At first, she thought it was merely grief playing tricks on her mind. But the visits continued, growing more vivid and unmistakable. Ball confided in only her most trusted friends about what happened next, including actress Ann Sothern and writer-producer Jess Oppenheimer. During private seances in the 1940s and 50s, she claimed that spirits would speak through her. Her voice would change dramatically, taking on qualities and accents she didn't naturally possess. Witnesses documented that she would relay specific messages from departed loved ones to living relatives, information she couldn't possibly have known. Ann Sothern later confirmed in her memoirs that she had attended one such gathering where Ball channeled Sothern's own mother, mentioning details about childhood events that Ball had never been told. Those present at these gatherings were both amazed and deeply unsettled. This wasn't the Lucy they knew from the screen. This was a woman experiencing something that defied explanation. One incident particularly shook those present. At a 1955 seance, attended by director William Asher, Ball suddenly began speaking in fluent Italian, a language she'd never studied. The words poured out in a Neapolitan dialect so specific that Asher's Italian mother-in-law, also present, confirmed it was authentic. When Ball came out of the trance 20 minutes later, she couldn't remember a single word she'd said. Asher recorded the session, and linguists later confirmed the dialect hadn't been spoken commonly since the 1800s. The seances became more frequent, and Ball's reliance on spiritual guidance deepened. When facing the painful decision to end her marriage to Desi Arnaz, she consulted with mediums and claimed to receive counsel from spirits who had crossed over. Friends recalled that she would sometimes lose track of time during these sessions, emerging hours later with no memory of what had transpired. The experience petrified her, yet she couldn't seem to stop seeking these connections to the other world. On the set of I Love Lucy, strange occurrences became almost routine. Props would move without explanation during the 1954 season filming. Cold spots would appear in certain corners of the Desilu Studios soundstage, particularly near Stage 2. Ball attributed these phenomena to spiritual visitors, though she kept these beliefs carefully hidden from the press. Her image as America's favorite redhead depended on maintaining an air of wholesome, zany fun. The public couldn't know that their Lucy was moonlighting as a medium. At Hollywood parties during the 1950s, Ball would occasionally slip into trances, channeling personalities of departed stars. Guests would watch in stunned silence as Lucy's mannerisms and speech patterns transformed into those of long-gone actresses. Director Vincente Minnelli witnessed one such episode at a 1956 dinner party, later describing how Ball had perfectly mimicked Jean Harlow's distinctive Missouri accent and speaking style, despite never having met Harlow. Some found it entertaining, others found it deeply disturbing. But all agreed on one thing: Ball wasn't acting. Something genuine was happening to her in those moments. But there were moments of unexpected beauty too. Lucy claimed she once channeled a Civil War soldier who described the sunset over Gettysburg with such haunting poetry that everyone present wept, including Lucy herself, who had no memory afterward of saying the words. The most chilling incident occurred in 1961, when Ball warned her close friend and producer William Frawley about an impending tragedy. She claimed a spirit had come to her with an urgent message about someone close to him facing grave danger within the month. When Frawley's nephew was involved in a near-fatal car accident 3 weeks later, exactly as Ball had described, those who knew about her warning were left profoundly shaken. How could she have known? Ball carried this double life well into her later years. Even as she continued entertaining millions through her television work in the 1970s, she privately maintained her spiritual practices. Friends from her final years reported that she had grown more comfortable with her abilities, though she still rarely discussed them publicly. She passed away in 1989, and among her personal effects, her family found journals documenting over 300 seances spanning 4 decades. She'd kept records of every spirit she'd channeled, every single one. Lucy's voices from beyond were unsettling, but they didn't cost her life. Jayne Mansfield wasn't so fortunate. Jayne Mansfield, the curse that followed her to her final moments. Jayne Mansfield thought befriending the Church of Satan's founder would boost her fading career. Instead, some believe it cost her her life. What began as a publicity stunt in 1966 would spiral into a nightmare that neither Mansfield nor those around her could escape. By the mid-1960s, Mansfield's star had dimmed considerably from its bright peak a decade earlier. The platinum blonde bombshell who had once rivaled Marilyn Monroe was now desperate for attention, for relevance, for anything that might reignite public interest. When she met Anton LaVey, the charismatic founder of the Church of Satan, she saw an opportunity. LaVey, equally eager for mainstream attention, saw in Mansfield the perfect celebrity endorsement for his controversial organization. Their relationship began as mutual exploitation, but quickly deepened into something far more unsettling. Mansfield attended rituals at LaVey's Black House in San Francisco, ceremonies captured in photographs that shocked those who saw them. She wasn't simply posing for publicity shots. She was participating fully, becoming increasingly immersed in LaVey's dark philosophy and practices. The black-painted Victorian house reeked of incense and something metallic, like old pennies, that clung to Mansfield's clothes long after she left. Friends noticed a change in her demeanor. The bubbly, almost childlike quality that had defined her public persona was giving way to something harder, more troubled. The situation reached a crisis point when LaVey became enraged with Mansfield's boyfriend, lawyer Sam Brody. According to multiple witnesses, including journalist and author Michael Aquino, who was present, LaVey performed a curse ritual specifically targeting Brody in May of 1967, declaring that he would perish within a year. Mansfield was present during this ceremony, and what she witnessed petrified her. She had entered this world thinking it was all theater, all showmanship. But LaVey's intensity and conviction shook that certainty. What if this was real? Strange incidents began plaguing Mansfield and Brody. Objects would fall without explanation in Mansfield's Pink Palace mansion. Accidents happened with alarming frequency. Brody's car was involved in multiple crashes over the following weeks, each one narrowly avoiding tragedy. Mansfield grew increasingly paranoid, convinced that malevolent attention was following them everywhere. She sought help from psychics and spiritual advisors throughout Los Angeles. She visited Catholic priests, begging them to lift whatever darkness had attached itself to her. Some refused, disturbed by what they sensed around her. Others tried and claimed the force was too strong, too deeply rooted. Mansfield desperately wanted to break free from LaVey's influence, but he seemed to have a hold over her that went beyond mere friendship or publicity. She confided to close friends, including actress Mamie Van Doren, that she felt trapped, that she had opened a door she couldn't close. The woman who had built her career on her beauty and vivacious personality was now living in constant dread of powers that defied explanation. On June 29, 1967, less than 2 months after LaVey pronounced his curse, Mansfield and Brody were traveling by car from Biloxi, Mississippi to New Orleans. In the early morning darkness, around 2:30, their vehicle collided with the rear of a tractor trailer that had slowed due to mosquito fogging. The humid Louisiana air was thick with the chemical spray, reducing visibility to almost nothing. The impact was catastrophic. Both Mansfield and Brody were taken instantly, along with their driver, Ronnie Harrison. Her 3 children, sleeping in the back seat, survived with minor injuries. The nature of the accident spawned immediate rumors. Some claimed Mansfield had been decapitated, though this was later proven false by autopsy reports. What couldn't be disputed was the timing. LaVey had predicted Brody would not survive the year, and he hadn't. Neither had Mansfield, the woman who had stood beside Brody as the curse was pronounced. The date fell within LaVey's prediction window with eerie precision. LaVey himself seemed shaken by the outcome. In later interviews throughout the 1970s, he acknowledged that he had indeed cursed Brody, and that the curse had worked exactly as intended. He expressed no remorse, viewing it as confirmation of his dark powers. Whether one believes in such things or dismisses them as tragic coincidence, the facts remain profoundly unsettling. Mansfield had danced with darkness, and darkness had claimed her in the most literal sense. You might be noticing a pattern. 3 actresses, 3 different experiences, but all 3 claimed something took hold of them, something beyond performance or imagination. And we're just getting started. Before we continue, I need to ask, are you still skeptical? Or are these stories making you question what's possible? We're only beginning. Subscribe now so you don't miss the 6 more chilling encounters ahead. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happened to Joan Crawford. A curse fulfilled, but at least it was fast. Joan Crawford's haunting lasted decades. Joan Crawford, seances, spirits, and the ghost she couldn't control. She was talking to empty rooms again. That's what Joan Crawford's housekeeper told the replacement staff member on her first day. Don't be alarmed. Miss Crawford sees people we can't see. It wasn't a joke. It was a warning. Behind her perfectly controlled public image, Joan Crawford was petrified of the spirits she believed haunted her mansion. Spirits she may have invited in herself. The woman who commanded every aspect of her life and career found herself powerless against forces from the other side. Crawford's fascination with the supernatural began in the 1940s, during the height of her career renaissance at Warner Brothers. Like many Hollywood stars of that era, she attended seances as a fashionable parlor entertainment. But what started as social curiosity quickly became an obsession. Crawford wasn't content to simply observe. She wanted to communicate, to control, to master this realm just as she had mastered her public image and professional life. Her Brentwood mansion became the center of regular spiritual gatherings. Crawford hired various mediums and spiritualists to conduct private sessions in her home, always seeking contact with those who had crossed over. She was particularly interested in reaching former stars from the silent era, actors and actresses whose careers had ended. When sound arrived, friends who attended these sessions recalled Crawford's intensity, her desperate need to make contact, to receive guidance from beyond. The candlelit rooms would fill with the scent of roses, Crawford's favorite, mixed with something colder, like winter air seeping through closed windows. But something went wrong. The spirits Crawford invited into her home apparently decided to stay. Staff members reported hearing footsteps in empty corridors late at night, the sharp click of heels on marble floors when Miss Crawford was asleep upstairs. Doors would open and close on their own. Objects moved from where they had been carefully placed. Crawford's famous obsession with cleanliness and order was constantly challenged by these inexplicable disturbances. She would arrive home to find furniture rearranged, personal items relocated to different rooms. Her immaculate household was being disrupted by entities she couldn't dominate. Crawford's response was characteristically aggressive. She amassed a substantial collection of occult books, studying protection rituals and spiritual defenses. She placed talismans throughout the house, hung crucifixes in strategic locations, and performed her own amateur cleansing ceremonies. But the disturbances continued. If anything, they intensified. The spirits, it seemed, were not interested in being controlled by Joan Crawford's iron will. Household staff shared disturbing accounts of Crawford's nighttime behavior. She would be found standing in empty rooms, carrying on animated conversations with invisible presences. Sometimes her voice would take on different qualities, deeper or higher pitched, as if someone else was speaking through her. In the morning, she would have no memory of these episodes. Her daughter Christina later recalled being frightened by her mother's claims that various rooms in the house were occupied by spirits who watched them constantly. The library, in particular, was said to be inhabited by a woman in a 1920s evening gown, who Crawford insisted was the actress Clara Bow. The spiritual activity affected Crawford's professional work as well. On several film sets during the 1950s, she claimed to feel possessed during particularly intense dramatic scenes. Directors and fellow actors noticed that Crawford would sometimes slip into a trance-like state, her performance taking on an almost otherworldly quality. She would emerge from these scenes disoriented, asking what had happened, claiming she couldn't remember delivering the lines. Director Robert Aldrich, who worked with her on Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, privately expressed concern about her mental state during production. As Crawford aged, her spiritual beliefs intensified rather than faded. She became increasingly paranoid, convinced that malevolent entities were conspiring against her. The need to control everything, her appearance, her home, her relationships, took on a frantic quality. Friends speculated that her deteriorating mental state was partly due to her long involvement with spiritual practices she didn't fully understand. She surrounded herself with religious artifacts while simultaneously maintaining her occult library, as if unsure which force might ultimately protect her. In her final days in 1977, weakened by illness, Crawford made cryptic statements to the few people allowed near her bedside. According to her secretary, she spoke of finally meeting them, of seeing faces she had been conversing with for decades. She claimed they were waiting for her just beyond sight, ready to welcome her or judge her. Whether these were the confused ramblings of a woman facing her end or genuine spiritual encounters, no one could say for certain. The woman who had controlled Hollywood couldn't control what waited on the other side. And perhaps that haunted her most of all. She passed away on May 10, 1977, alone except for whatever presences she believed surrounded her. Crawford invited spirits in. Natalie Wood had no choice. Fate had already marked her. Natalie Wood, the premonition she couldn't escape. Natalie Wood drowned on November 28, 1981, off Catalina Island. She was 43 years old. The dark water claimed her exactly as a gypsy had warned when Natalie was just a child. You will meet your end in dark water. For 4 decades, that prophecy possessed every moment of her existence. The incident that sealed her fate occurred when Natalie was just a little girl, during a visit to a traveling carnival with her mother Maria. The young girl, born Natalia Nikolaevna Zakharenko, was already showing the beauty and talent that would make her a star. But when a gypsy fortune teller looked into her eyes, what she saw made her recoil. The woman grabbed little Natalie's hand and delivered the chilling prediction that would haunt her for life. Maria Gurdon, Natalie's mother, was deeply superstitious, a trait common among Russian immigrants of her generation. Rather than dismissing the prophecy as carnival nonsense, she embraced it as truth. She repeated the warning to Natalie throughout her childhood, embedding the fear so deeply that it became part of the girl's very identity. Natalie grew up believing that dark water held her doom. The cruel irony was that Hollywood repeatedly cast Wood in films involving water. In The Green Promise at age 10, she nearly drowned during a stunt gone wrong, an experience that reinforced the prophecy's grip on her psyche. Years later, she starred in Splendor in the Grass, which required water scenes that left her trembling with terror. The making of The Great Race involved elaborate water sequences that had to be carefully managed around Wood's extreme hydrophobia. Those close to Wood described her fear as more than simple phobia. It was a bone-deep conviction that water was waiting to claim her. She would grow pale near swimming pools, her hands trembling if she had to stand too close to the edge. Lakes made her physically ill, triggering nausea and panic attacks. The ocean filled her with dread so profound that friends wondered how she managed to live in California at all. Yet she couldn't escape water, not in her professional life and not in her personal one either. What made the prophecy even more unsettling was Wood's claim that she felt pulled toward water despite her terror. She would describe it as a magnetic force, something calling to her from the depths. She told friends about recurring dreams where she was drowning, unable to breathe, darkness closing in around her. These weren't ordinary nightmares. They felt like previews of something inevitable, rehearsals for a scene she would eventually have to perform. In the weeks before November 1981, people close to Wood noticed an intensification of her anxiety. She seemed haunted, distracted, speaking more frequently about the childhood prophecy she had carried for 4 decades. Her husband, Robert Wagner, later recalled that she had been unusually melancholy, as if some part of her knew what was approaching. She had confided to close friends that the dreams about drowning had become more frequent and more vivid, occurring almost nightly. On the night of November 28th, Wood was aboard the yacht Splendor near Catalina Island with Wagner and actor Christopher Walken. The circumstances of what happened remain disputed to this day. What is known is that sometime during the night, Natalie Wood went into the dark water off the back of the boat. The water was black as ink that night, lapping against the yacht's hull with a sound like whispers. Whether she fell, jumped, or was trying to secure a dinghy that was banging against the hull, no one can say with certainty. Her body was found the following morning, floating in the Pacific, wearing a nightgown and down jacket. She was 43 years old. The Gypsies' prophecy, spoken when Natalie was just a child, had come to pass with terrible precision. Had the prophecy created a self-fulfilling destiny? Did believing in the curse make it real? Or had that fortune teller truly seen something in young Natalie's future? Some unavoidable fate written in the darkness? Wood carried that question her entire life, and now it passes to those who remember her. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department reopened her case in 2011. They changed her cause from accident to drowning and other undetermined factors. 30 years later, even investigators couldn't explain what happened in that dark water. One prophecy controlled her life, but Shirley MacLaine welcomed hundreds of spirits on purpose. Shirley MacLaine, the actress who channeled ancient spirits. When Shirley MacLaine started telling talk show hosts that ancient Incan warriors were speaking through her body, Hollywood didn't know whether to laugh or be concerned. Then they watched her on set, and the laughter stopped. While her contemporaries collected Oscars, Shirley MacLaine claimed she was collecting past lives, and the spirits from those lives sometimes took control. The woman who charmed audiences in films like The Apartment and Terms of Endearment was leading a double existence that made her Hollywood peers question her sanity. MacLaine's spiritual awakening didn't arrive with the gentle grace of a meditation retreat. It hit her like a thunderbolt during the filming of a television miniseries in Peru in the early 1980s. The actress had traveled to the ancient Incan sites, expecting nothing more than exotic locations for her project. Instead, she experienced what she would later describe as a complete spiritual transformation that opened doorways she had never known existed. During her time in Peru, MacLaine claimed she began remembering past lives with startling clarity. These weren't vague feelings or poetic metaphors. She insisted she was accessing actual memories from previous incarnations. She recalled being a Peruvian princess in the Incan Empire, a warrior who had fought in ancient battles, and the lover of Charlemagne in medieval France. The memories came with sensory details, tastes, smells, emotions that felt absolutely real to her. The thin mountain air at Machu Picchu seemed to trigger something in her consciousness, unlocking experiences that felt both foreign and intimately familiar. But the most unsettling experiences involved what MacLaine described as channeling sessions. Working with spiritual guides and mediums, she claimed that ancient spirits would speak through her, using her voice to communicate messages. During these sessions, witnesses reported that MacLaine's entire demeanor would transform. Her voice would take on different accents and speech patterns. Her facial expressions and body language would change completely. Most disturbing of all, she would sometimes speak in languages she had never studied, ancient dialects that linguistic experts couldn't always identify. In one documented incident during a 1983 channeling session attended by several writers and journalists, MacLaine allegedly spoke in what Andean language specialists later identified as Quechua, an Incan language she had never formally studied. She described architectural details of Incan temples that she shouldn't have known, including the specific placement of astronomical markers that weren't visible to casual tourists. When researchers later verified these details, even skeptics struggled to explain how she could have possessed such specific knowledge. When these channeling episodes ended, MacLaine often had no memory of what had transpired. She would emerge confused and disoriented, having lost minutes or even hours. Her hands would be ice cold despite warm room temperatures, and she would smell distinctly of sage, though no sage had been burning. Friends who witnessed these sessions were both fascinated and deeply concerned. This didn't seem like acting or imagination. Something genuine appeared to be taking hold of Shirley MacLaine. But the channeling took a darker turn in the late 1980s. During a session in her Malibu home, MacLaine claimed a violent spirit entered her, one she described as angry and hateful. Witnesses reported that she began thrashing, her face contorting into expressions of rage that seemed beyond her physical control. She spoke in a guttural voice, threatening those present in a language no one recognized. It took 3 people to restrain her slight frame. When she finally came back to herself, she had scratches on her arms that she hadn't caused herself, and her voice was hoarse for days. She never spoke publicly about what had happened during those missing 20 minutes, and she stopped conducting group channeling sessions after that night. Hollywood's reaction was swift and harsh. Studio executives, directors, and fellow actors who had respected MacLaine's considerable talent now questioned whether she had lost her grip on reality. Her spiritual claims were seen as professional liability, potential evidence of mental instability. The industry that had celebrated her Oscar-winning performance in terms of endearment now whispered that she had gone completely around the bend. Offers for serious dramatic roles began to dry up. But there were moments of wonder too. MacLaine claimed she once channeled an Egyptian priestess who sang in an ancient language with such haunting beauty that recording engineers present saved the tape, unable to believe such sounds could come from a human throat. Musicologists who later analyzed the recording found it contained quarter tones and vocal techniques not present in Western singing traditions. MacLaine's response was characteristically defiant. Rather than retreating or downplaying her experiences, she doubled down. She began writing books documenting her spiritual journey, starting with Out on a Limb in 1983. In these works, she detailed her past life memories and channeling experiences with absolute conviction. These weren't metaphorical explorations of spirituality. She insisted that spirits literally possessed her body and spoke through her mouth. The books became bestsellers, creating a curious divide in public perception. Millions of readers found her spiritual journey inspiring and validating. But in Hollywood, her career suffered. Serious dramatic roles became harder to secure. Some directors refused to work with her, concerned about her stability. Longtime friends distanced themselves, uncomfortable with her increasingly intense spiritual claims. MacLaine continued conducting channeling sessions well into her 80s, attending spiritual retreats and seeking out past life regressions. She spoke openly about the various entities that visited her, each with distinct personalities and ancient wisdom to share. To MacLaine, these weren't fantasies or psychological projections. They were as real as the people she encountered in her daily life. The actress who had once been known for her sharp wit and grounded performances now lived between 2 worlds. The visible Hollywood she had conquered and an invisible spiritual realm that had conquered her. Whether one views her experiences as genuine spiritual possession or elaborate self-delusion, MacLaine's unshakable conviction forces us to consider unsettling questions about consciousness, identity, and what might exist beyond our ordinary perception. She continues to believe, to this day, that those ancient spirits still speak through her when called upon. 6 stories now, and a troubling consistency. Each woman described losing herself, whether to spirits, curses, or identities that wouldn't let go. The methods varied, but the invasion of self remained constant. MacLaine sought possession willingly. Mia Farrow stumbled into it, and it destroyed everything. Mia Farrow, when Rosemary's Baby became reality. Mia Farrow thought she was acting in a horror film about demonic possession. 1 year later, her director's pregnant wife would be brutally taken by a cult in one of Hollywood's most horrifying tragedies, and everyone connected to Rosemary's Baby would wonder if making the film had invited genuine darkness into their lives. The parallels were too precise to be dismissed. Mia Farrow had portrayed a woman whose baby was claimed by a satanic conspiracy. Sharon Tate, wife of Rosemary's Baby director Roman Polanski, was 8 months pregnant when members of Charles Manson's cult invaded her home on August 9, 1969. The connection felt like more than coincidence. It felt like a prophecy fulfilled. But the darkness had begun much earlier, during the film's production in 1967. Director Roman Polanski had developed an intense fascination with the occult while researching Ira Levin's best-selling novel. He consulted with practitioners of dark arts, studied historical accounts of demonic possession, and immersed himself so deeply in the material that some colleagues began to worry about his mental state. When filming began, Polanski brought that obsessive energy to the set, demanding absolute authenticity from every aspect of the production. The Dakota, the Gothic apartment building on Manhattan's Upper West Side, where much of the filming took place, carried its own dark history. Built in the 1880s, the building had long been associated with strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena. Residents spoke of hearing footsteps in empty hallways, of seeing shadowy figures in the corridors. Some units remained perpetually difficult to rent, as if something unwelcoming lingered within their walls. The building's architect had included strange symbols in the facade, designs that some claimed had occult significance. From the earliest days of production, the cast and crew experienced unsettling incidents. Unexplained sounds would interrupt takes, whispers that seemed to come from within the walls themselves. Equipment would malfunction without apparent cause, cameras jamming during crucial possession scenes. Several crew members reported feeling an oppressive presence during their work, particularly during night shoots. Temperature drops would occur in specific rooms for no mechanical reason, the kind of cold that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves rather than from any physical source. Farrow herself began claiming that she felt invaded during the film's intense possession scenes, as if something was actually entering her body rather than her simply performing. The personal cost of the role became apparent as Farrow's marriage to Frank Sinatra deteriorated during filming. Sinatra had opposed the project from the beginning, sensing something ominous about it. He would visit the set and leave looking disturbed, telling friends that the atmosphere felt wrong, corrupted somehow. As filming progressed, their relationship collapsed entirely, mirroring the isolation and abandonment that Rosemary experiences in the film. The eerie parallel between art and life unsettled everyone involved. Sinatra served Farrow divorce papers while she was on set, a cruel echo of the film's themes of betrayal, but nothing could prepare the production for what would happen the following year. In August 1969, Sharon Tate was brutally taken by members of the Manson family in one of Hollywood's most horrifying tragedies. Tate was 8.5 months pregnant with Polanski's child. The savagery of the crime shocked the world, but for those connected to Rosemary's Baby, the horror ran deeper. The connection to their film, a story about a woman whose baby is claimed by a satanic cult, felt too precise to be mere coincidence. Some wondered whether making the film had somehow invited darkness into Polanski's life. Farrow was deeply shaken by what happened to Tate. The two women had never met, but Farrow felt an eerie connection to her through the film they had both touched in different ways. She began speaking about how playing Rosemary had opened spiritual doors that she didn't know how to close. The role had required her to tap into primal fears about pregnancy, vulnerability, and evil. Now those fears seem to have manifested in the real world in the most terrible way imaginable. In the years following the film, Farrow sought spiritual cleansing from various sources. She consulted with priests, mediums, and spiritual advisors, trying to understand what had happened and whether she bore some responsibility for inviting malevolent forces into her life. The question haunted her. Had portraying a woman victimized by satanic conspiracy somehow made her vulnerable to actual darkness? The parallels continued to plague her life in disturbing ways. Her relationship with Woody Allen, which began years later, would eventually involve allegations and family destruction that echoed the film's themes of innocence corrupted and trust betrayed. Her children faced troubles that seemed to mirror the cursed destiny of Rosemary's Baby in the film. 2 of her adopted children would later pass away under tragic circumstances, deepening the sense that some dark shadow had never lifted from her life. Farrow has never fully escaped the shadow of Rosemary's Baby. The role that should have been simply a remarkable dramatic performance instead became something that invaded her real life, blurring the boundaries between fiction and terrible reality. Whether these were tragic coincidences or evidence of spiritual forces unleashed by the film remains a question that disturbs those who remember what happened. The film's premiere occurred on June 12, 1968. 14 months later, Sharon Tate was gone. The timing felt like a countdown that no one had noticed until it was too late. 7 stories now. And the Tate tragedy raises an impossible question. Was making Rosemary's Baby genuinely dangerous? Tell us in the comments. Do you believe these actresses encountered real spirits, or is there a psychological explanation? Your grandmother probably watched these stars. Share your memories of them below. If Mia Farrow believed her role opened dark doorways, her on-screen mother experienced something equally traumatic and suffered permanent physical damage that serves as a constant reminder. Ellen Burstyn, the Exorcist's other victim. While everyone focused on what happened to Linda Blair, her on-screen mother, Ellen Burstyn was dealing with her own demonic encounters and an injury that still haunts her. The accomplished actress had expected a challenging role. What she got was an experience that left her permanently damaged, both physically and spiritually. Burstyn was already an established dramatic actress when she accepted the role of Chris McNeil, the desperate mother fighting to save her possessed daughter. She approached the part with professional seriousness, trusting director William Friedkin's vision for the film. That trust would prove costly in ways she couldn't have imagined. Friedkin was obsessed with capturing authentic reactions on camera. He didn't want performances that looked real. He wanted performances that were real. To achieve this, he employed methods that bordered on dangerous. He would fire guns loaded with blanks near actors to capture genuine startlement. He kept the set refrigerated to uncomfortable temperatures to make the actors' discomfort visible. He pushed his cast to physical and emotional extremes, believing that real suffering would translate to more powerful cinema. The most infamous incident involved a stunt where Burstyn's character is thrown across the bedroom by an invisible demonic force. Friedkin rigged Burstyn with a harness connected to a wire that would yank her backward violently. He wanted the impact to look brutal and real. What he achieved was both, because it was real. During one take, the stuntman pulled the wire with such force that Burstyn was thrown backward and slammed into the floor with devastating impact. The crack of her spine hitting the floor echoed through the refrigerated set, a sound Ellen Burstyn would hear in her nightmares for decades. The scream that audiences hear in the film, that agonized cry of pain, wasn't acting. It was genuine. Burstyn had suffered a permanent injury to her spine, damage that would cause her chronic pain for the rest of her life. Friedkin kept the take in the film, valuing the authentic anguish over his actress's well-being. But Burstyn's suffering went beyond physical injury. Like Blair, she began sensing something malevolent on that set. The atmosphere felt oppressive, heavy with a presence that seemed to feed on the fear and pain being manufactured for the cameras. Between takes, Burstyn would retreat to her dressing room, trying to shake off the feeling of invisible scrutiny, as if something was studying her, perhaps even entering her during those intense scenes. The cold wasn't just from the refrigeration units. There was a deeper chill that seemed to emanate from nowhere and everywhere at once. The psychological toll of repeatedly screaming for her possessed daughter proved more damaging than anyone anticipated. To deliver those scenes convincingly, Burstyn had to access deep wells of maternal terror and helplessness. Night after night, she would tap into primal fears about losing a child to powers that defied explanation. The boundaries of self began eroding. She found herself unable to sleep without nightmares, unable to separate the horror she was portraying from the horror she was beginning to feel was real. Father William O'Malley, the Jesuit priest hired as technical advisor for the film, grew increasingly concerned about what was happening on set. He had initially approached the project as an opportunity to consult on a fictional portrayal of possession. But as filming progressed, he began expressing private worries to colleagues that they might be dealing with something beyond fiction, that the intense focus on demonic themes might be inviting actual spiritual danger. He performed informal blessings over the set, though he never publicized this at the time. After filming wrapped, Burstyn found herself plagued by nightmares that went far beyond the usual stress dreams of a demanding production. She would wake in terror, convinced she wasn't alone in her bedroom, feeling a pressure on her chest as if something was sitting on her. The injuries to her spine served as a constant physical reminder of the film, but the spiritual and psychological scars proved even more persistent. She had difficulty discussing the production for years, as if talking about it might somehow reopen doors that she desperately wanted to keep closed. Decades later, and finally willing to speak more openly about her experience, Burstyn revealed the full extent of what making The Exorcist had cost her. In interviews from the 2000s, she acknowledged that the injury that still causes her daily pain was just the visible damage. The invisible wounds, the sense that she had been touched by something dark during those possession scenes, remained with her. She described feeling as though she had brushed against genuine evil, not just portrayed it. She's 89 now. The injury still causes her pain every single day, a constant reminder that some performances demand more than we should ever ask. Physical scars and spiritual wounds from The Exorcist. But what if the possession wasn't demonic? What if it was the role itself? Kim Novak, possessed by Vertigo's ghost. Alfred Hitchcock demanded total submission from his actresses. But when Kim Novak played a woman possessed by a departed woman's spirit in Vertigo, something deeper than method acting took hold. The role that should have showcased her talent instead consumed her identity in ways that would take decades to overcome. Hitchcock had originally wanted Grace Kelly for the dual role of Madeleine Elster and Judy Barton, but when Kelly proved unavailable, he reluctantly cast Novak. From the beginning, he made his disappointment clear. He criticized her hair, her wardrobe choices, her voice, her mannerisms. Nothing about Kim Novak satisfied the exacting director. He wanted to erase who she was and rebuild her into his vision of the perfect blonde goddess. He told her directly that she was not Grace Kelly and never would be, a cruelty that cut deeper each time he repeated it. The role itself required a dangerous level of psychological complexity. Novak had to portray Judy, an ordinary shopgirl, pretending to be Madeleine, a wealthy woman who believed herself possessed by her great-grandmother, Carlotta Valdez. Three distinct identities nested within one another like Russian dolls. To play this convincingly, Novak had to surrender herself completely to the performance. Hitchcock demanded nothing less than her total psychological submission. The filming process became a form of psychological torture. Hitchcock insisted that Novak completely inhabit Madeleine's consciousness, even between takes. He wanted her to think like Madeleine, move like Madeleine, exist as Madeleine. On set, he would address her as Madeleine rather than Kim, reinforcing the blurring of boundaries between actress and character. The manipulation was deliberate and relentless. Crew members grew uncomfortable watching how Hitchcock systematically dismantled Novak's sense of self. As production continued, Novak began experiencing identity dissolution. She would look in mirrors and not recognize the reflection staring back. Her own voice sounded foreign to her ears, as if it belonged to someone else. She caught herself speaking in Madeleine's cadence and using phrases she didn't remember learning. Most disturbing of all, she began experiencing dissociative episodes, where significant periods of time would simply vanish from her memory. She would find herself in her hotel room with no recollection of how she'd gotten there or what had happened in the hours between. The filming at San Juan Bautista Mission, where the story reaches its climactic revelation, proved particularly unsettling. The location itself carried a reputation for spiritual activity. Local residents spoke of apparitions in the bell tower, of hearing voices in the empty courtyard. Some claimed the spirit of a young woman who had passed away tragically there in the 19th century still lingered, trapped between worlds. Whether Novak knew these stories before filming or discovered them later, The setting intensified her already fragile psychological state. The mission's thick adobe walls seemed to absorb sound and light, creating pockets of cold shadow even in bright sunlight. By the time production wrapped, Novak was barely holding herself together. She had spent months embodying a woman possessed by another woman's spirit. Now she couldn't tell where the performance ended and her actual self began. She would wake, not knowing if she was Kim or Madeleine or Judy, the three identities tangled into an incomprehensible knot. Friends noticed the change. The vibrant, confident actress who had begun the project had been replaced by someone tentative, frightened, and profoundly lost. The breakdown came shortly after the film's release in 1958. Novak required professional care and time away from Hollywood to begin recovering her sense of self, but the damage proved more lasting than anyone anticipated. For years afterward, she struggled with her identity. The question haunted her. Was she Kim Novak who had played Madeleine, or was she Madeleine pretending to be Kim Novak? The dissociative episodes continued sporadically for years, triggered by mirrors, by certain pieces of music, by the color green that Madeleine had worn. Hitchcock's masterpiece had required the destruction of his leading lady's psychological stability. Whether he understood the cost of what he was demanding or simply didn't care remains unclear. Some colleagues suggested he knew exactly what he was doing, that he needed Novak genuinely fragmented to capture the authenticity he sought on camera. What cannot be disputed is that playing a woman possessed by a spirit led to Novak's actual possession, not by a supernatural entity, but by the character itself, which had invaded her consciousness so completely that it never fully left. Decades passed before Novak could speak openly about the experience. Even then, she struggled to articulate what had happened to her. In interviews from the 1990s and 2000s, she described the role as a form of spiritual violation, comparing it to having her soul temporarily removed. The role had invaded her consciousness so completely that she spent the rest of her life trying to reclaim the person she had been before Hitchcock's camera. The question that Vertigo itself poses, where does identity end and illusion begin, became terrifyingly real for the actress who embodied that question. Kim Novak learned that sometimes the greatest danger of playing possessed is that you might never fully come back to yourself. She eventually found peace through painting and living away from Hollywood, but she never worked with Hitchcock again. The price of his perfectionism had been her sense of self. These 9 stories reveal how thin the veil between acting and reality can become. Share this with classic film fans who remember these actresses, but warn them these tales might keep them awake tonight. And if you haven't already, please like this video. 9 actresses. 9 encounters with forces that defied explanation. Whether you believe in spirits or see these as psychological trauma, one truth remains. These women paid an extraordinary price for their art. The performances you love were created at a cost audiences never knew, and now you do. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more untold stories from Hollywood's golden age, and share this with someone who remembers these legends, but warn them they'll never watch these films the same way again. Until next time, this is Golden Age Files, celebrating the complicated truth behind Hollywood's greatest legends.